People see your glory, but they don't necessarily know the story.
And you define the success, not the world.
Children learn what they live.
Sometimes our stories don't serve us.
We don't care about your titles. We care about you being happy.
I'd sit on Saturday morning, my next door neighbors babysat me, got my hair cornrow, we sit, watch Soul Train, whatever the things were we were doing, but it was the Black experience for me.
We made it to our very own Ann and Taydra podcast, but I'm so happy to see you.
Thank you.
I'm glad we're able to do this together.
Thank you, Taydra.
So how did we get here? How did we get to shooting a podcast?
It's been a journey.
It has been a journey.
It's been a journey. But I think about it, it's a natural evolution for us.
Yep.
We spend lots of time together as sister friends, as mentors to each other. And this is the natural manifestation of that, for us to be here and to talk to each other, but to do it for others, to hear our conversations.
Yeah.
And where we've been on our journey and how we got to where we are. And most importantly, what we've learned along the way.
I agree. If people knew how much we talk and spend time, both from a mentor perspective, but just in terms of building each other up, lifting each other up, over the years, how our friendship and our relationship has evolved. I am so blessed to count you as one of my closest friends, sisters, advisors. I tell people you're my sister and mentor. But just the conversations that we've had at the various transitions of our life. And I think also we each have had experiences where we've been able to talk to and pour into people that are coming behind us on this journey. And what I love about the spark for this is we were having a conversation and you told me about a panel that you had done in one of your many roles. I think this was in your WNBA co-owner role. And you talked about the fact that there were a number of young women who were just really looking for advice, perspective, no one really to look to. Looking for answers, and that there might be an opportunity for us, to talk about what we've done, where we've been, and maybe to have some mentor moments, on camera. So I think we might have started less than 12 weeks ago getting ready for this, and now we're here.
I think that's right. And I think, for me, it was also thinking back to our younger days.
Yeah.
And maybe even some of the things we wished we would have had.
Yeah.
But I'll just say the things that we go through too, by the way, aren't just for younger women.
Yep.
They're also for women just like us.
Absolutely.
Because the conversations we have are real, they're current, and they're things that we're going through today.
Right.
So no matter age or stage, I think what we're going to talk about is highly relevant.
I agree. So we started, I think, talking a lot about our stories.
Yes.
And especially being a woman in corporate America or in enterprise, whatever the enterprise might be, a Black woman in particular,
Yeah.
there are a unique set of challenges that we have, a unique set of experiences that we have. And one of the things that I love as we were discussing is we just started talking about the power of your story, like understanding your story, how your story shows up, whether you are defined by your story or whether you transcend it. What do you do with those pieces of your life that are considered your origin story and make it into something magical? And how are you personally empowered?
Yes.
How do you take power and take your agency? You love that word, agency.
Agency.
I know we're going to hear agency a lot through these episode series. So even as we get started, like we decided we wanted to do this limited series of our podcast, but really talking about our story. So let's start. Maybe we just get into it.
Let's go.
So you want to start? You want to talk about your origin story? What's your story, Ann Sempowski Ward?
Such a story. It's funny because one of the things that happens in my story is, as I was thinking about having this conversation, I was reflecting back on my story, because one of the things that's true about me, and you know this, is that I move on, right, from things. So like whatever's happening, I say, okay, that was the past, can't change the past. But going back and thinking about my story took me back into the past to say, all right, what was true about my origins that is still true today? And then what are the things that I left behind? So I'll start by saying, and you know this, born and raised in Detroit. And here we sit.
Here we sit.
Y'all, shout out. We are in Detroit. But born and raised here, but born in a kind of a strange time and a strange moment for the city. Detroit was very, kind of coming out of well, first of all, the riots in the late 60s.
Yeah.
And then going into the early 70s, which is when I was born. Detroit was like a different place. It was, there was this experience called white flight, where people left the city, all the white people left the city, all the Black people stayed. And there were a few white people that stayed behind, but for the most part, that's what the moment that Detroit really became what we know today. Yeah. And even now it's going through an evolution, but we'll put that aside. But I was actually born to a mother who was white, and my father is Black. Or was. He's passed away now. But my father was Black. And so we're in this time in the early 70s of like race. They weren't married. And so I think that whole moment created a time and a space where I was like, okay, here I come into this world, being launched into this world in this dichotomy of race. But the truth of the matter is, my dad didn't really raise me. So he lived with us until I was about 6. But I was raised by my mother, who was white, who was living in this predominantly Black city. And so what was interesting to me is I never saw myself as anything but a Black woman from the moment that I was in this world. Because everybody around me, with the exception of my mother, were Black women, powerful Black women, doing all kinds of things. And, I'd sit on Saturday morning, my next door neighbors babysat me, got my hair cornrowed, we sit, watch Soul Train, whatever the things were we were doing, but it was the Black experience for me. And so as I got older, I came to know, because people would come and talk to me about being biracial. And a lot of people even still today want me to talk to their young daughters who are biracial and really challenged around thinking about their identity, particularly around race. And I always say to them, I don't know that I can give advice to your young biracial daughter. I said, because I consider myself a Black woman. And that's the world that I live in. And I said, so if there's any confusion in your daughter's mind or anybody's mind, all I can do is be like, listen, just be you, do you. Because that's what I did. And I will say the thing that was probably the most powerful opening, if I ever give advice to people around this and navigating life from a biracial kind of context, is let people be who they are. And if that is the greatest single gift that my mother, this single mother raising biracial children, gave us, is she let us be who we were. She didn't say, wait, you want to do this and you want to consider yourself a Black woman? I feel like you're negating me. My mother has never said that. She has never felt that. She has said, this is your experience. This is how you live in the world. And so for me, that became kind of, I don't know, just freeing. Like it didn't create this structure or this confine that I think we tend to do in the world of race. But again, for me, my whole experience is Black. So I just live it. Like it's not anything, it's natural for me. And so that's kind of my origin story and growing up in Detroit, which is all Black everything all the time.
The blackest city,
one of the blackest cities on the planet. Okay. And, so for me, it's just normal. But there were times where I was younger and my Black experience didn't understand that I had a white mother, for example, or the fairness in my skin or some of the other things that we can talk about. All of that is part of even being Black and, some of the things that I know we'll talk about throughout our time together, because that creates a whole different context. But that's my origin story at its core.
Yeah.
And it's about, race and the construct of race. But what it also is about is this idea of freedom and the way that I approach the world.
Yeah.
And the ability for me to see people for who they really are and the experiences that they have, because I've had so many different ones along the way. And that story is incredibly powerful to me. But it also has had some things that have made me think about why I've made certain choices I've made along the way.
Yeah, and one of the things I love about your story, and we've talked about this, like, I don't find that when you walk into situations that you prejudge.
No.
And I know we'll get into a little bit of, your experience with walking into rooms and, how people have kind of sized you up, assessed you. But I love the fact that, and that's one of the things that you have taught me too, in terms of, I think we all have a potential predisposition, based on where you've come from. And I love that about you. But I love your story. I don't know how many people have heard it. Like, they see you moving in these different spaces. They see how you show up, WNBA co-owner, CEO, a former CEO of Curio Brands, and now chairman of the board. And all of the places, even, how you like moved from P&G throughout your career, and people see your glory, but they don't necessarily know the story. They don't know the challenges. And I think as we've talked, that's one of the things that we want women. I want women to get comfortable in the story, who you are, that there is no shame in where you've come from, whatever that experience has been, because it fuels you and it puts a fire in you and it informs, how you can then show up in the world. But you get to decide that. But I'll talk a little bit about mine.
Yes, please. I was going to say.
And then we'll get into it. So when I think about my origin story, I don't know. It's a variety. There's a variety. I think people see me now and they see, the woman who ascended through the ranks of corporate. They see someone who's really passionate about beauty. I've been so blessed to be in the beauty community and an executive, if you will, in the beauty world, celebrating decades.
Don't say decades.
Only a few. We don't have to say how many decades. And people see that, they see that part of me, that side of me. But I was born in LA, raised in Oakland. My parents divorced when I was about 5 or 6 years old. So even though my father is still alive, my mom was really the predominant person that was in the household. At that time, both of my parents are Florida A&M graduates, so I'm a second generation college student, rattlers in the house for sure. At that time, when my parents came out of school, there were a number of their kind of classmates who had also moved out to California, because as I said, I grew up in California. And my godparents, my uncle, I called him Uncle Bernard. He's known as Bernard Kinsey, and my auntie Shirley. They were kind of early entrants into the Xerox world. And so everybody that I knew at some point worked for Xerox. All of the Black people in my orbit were Xerox people. So my mom ended up transitioning from being a teacher into Xerox. My dad was, I think, doing something in chemical sales, and he moved into Xerox. And so I was surrounded by Black excellence and corporate excellence, but also just a very kind of like just very grind culture in terms of put your head down, do the work. If you do the work, you get a good job, you keep a good job, you stay in that job forever, and you'll get your reward, right? So don't make a lot of waves, move forward. And so I grew up in that environment. And also, you and I have talked about the fact that even when you tell your origin story, I also grew up in the church. And so stories in the church are very different than stories in real life. So I had an apostolic grandmother, which meant that when I would go spend summers with her on Sundays, you go to church. And at church, there was testimony service. Before there was these praise and worship and, the entire band on stage, there was a deacon who got up and opened the church service. And then they would open it up for testimony service. And testimony service was when people would get up and basically thank God for what he had done. But the stories were normally rooted in some, transformational tragedy, right? So if you got up and talked about how God had delivered you from whatever it might have been, an addiction, or he paid your phone bill, or he did all these things, the church people do backflips. So much applause. But if you stood up and said, you've been blessed and, all your needs are supplied and all, there's nothing but goodness that's come to your life, that's good. That's, that gets a small praise. And so, I learned this framework, if you will, of this, there's pain. And then, we've talked about this framework. There's pain, and then you persevere through something, and then you get this external applause.
Praise.
And so, I had on one side this idea of putting your head down, doing the work, getting it done. And this other side of kind of seeing this, when I tell my story, it needs to have some zhuzh to it. I need to have some tragedy. So but I was also taught very much to be excellent, right? So because of the world that I grew up in, my mother was working. She was a single mom and she was working. So listen, unless your foot has been cut off or you are bleeding and they have to call the ambulance, do not bother me on my job.
Yep.
Figure it out.
Figure it out.
And do what you're supposed to do. So I learned excellence. I learned to perform and to make sure that I was getting things done. I learned to keep my head down and be quiet. And then though, when you do tell the story, whatever story, you need to kind of find that, that pain, and so I think, being a person that has come from a place where I did have exposure to the things that I had exposure to, I just kind of had to learn how to get it done. And then somewhere along the way, you become, I think I became someone who you was looking for, or you kind of get a bit addicted to the applause, right? You're looking for, okay, so I got straight A's. Okay, check that off. Okay, I did XYZ. Okay, I checked that off. Okay, I got a scholarship to college. Okay, I checked that off. And along the way, just learning to perform and to perform for some level of applause, but then getting right back into working. And so when I think about how that has informed my corporate journey, if you will, we've talked a lot about the experiences that we've walked through and, the things that we have come up against. And just trying to do that work to ensure that you're always accepted, right? That you're not really causing any waves, you're accepted, and you're always doing what you're supposed to do. But at some point, sometimes doing what you're supposed to do doesn't necessarily satisfy you. At some point, doing what you're supposed to do doesn't necessarily provide the internal fulfillment.
Yes.
And so then when I started to kind of move in my own direction, the people around me were like, wait a minute, that's not what we said. Wait a minute.
Your family and your friends.
My family and my friends. Wait, you want to do what now? You want to move off wait. And so my journey has been appreciating that story, appreciating where I came from, appreciating that my mother was an incredible single mom who worked, her butt off, retired as a vice president from Xerox, was wildly, wildly successful, and appreciating that I can take from that experience what I need to take from it and then create my own. And so that's what I've been able to do, but not without pain, not without departure, if you will, at sometimes from, what someone would call the path that you're supposed to be on, and not without at times being lonely, and making those decisions and making sure that I'm driving my story the way that I want to drive it. So I think if I had any advice to women who are thinking about their story and how it informs their path, I would say you got to follow your heart. You have to follow your passion. You have to follow your leading and stay true to yourself. And ultimately, when you do that, I think you end up in the place that you want to be, even if the road might be um,
A little bumpy.
a little bumpy, a little bumpy along the way.
You know what's so powerful about this, what you just said is, first of all, the bringing presence to this whole, how your origin story got you where you are. It was like the wind beneath your wings that propelled you. Shout out to the single mothers who, we both had them, who allowed us to, well, first of all, we're of the generation where they did just throw us out there.
Oh my.
And just be like, okay, you figure it out.
Oh my.
But it allowed us to kind of have this, I don't know, this just ingrained notion that when we go out there, we can get it done.
For sure.
So that's a really powerful lesson, whether they intended it completely or was out of necessity. It's what happened for us. So shout out to our mothers.
Yeah.
But I also think what's powerful is bringing a presence to this and realizing that, at the end of the day, what you want is the centering point.
Yes.
Not what others want for you. And I know there are so many people who have been on that journey where what you just said resonated deeply, where they have followed norms of cultures.
Yeah.
They have followed norms of people they greatly respect. Even the idea of being a mentor and advisor when you're in corporate America and you have people who tell you this should be your career track.
Yes.
And this is what you should do to progress.
Yes.
Those are all forms of that. And everyone in their own way is trying to be helpful because they're living through their own experience. And they're saying, hey, I have some advice for you. I mean, we're sitting here in a podcast that's likely to be advice to people. Yeah. But I think what I think is so special about what we're trying to do is we're not trying to give advice about what someone should do.
Right.
We're trying to unlock the depth of conversation and even those things that we don't even consciously know we do.
Yeah.
Because they're just life.
They're just life.
They're just life. There's the life that we've lived.
Yeah.
There's the people that are involved with us. And so you sharing that, I think, is incredibly powerful. And I similarly, like even some of the things that I think about that you have shared with me over the years has been incredibly powerful for me to just unlock. And when you ask me questions, and I think, this is part of what being sisters is really about. And we'll talk about that too. But this whole point around how are you there for someone in a way and not infusing your perspective, but instead trying to help pull out their own perspective.
Yeah.
And allow people to trust their gut around what's right for them.
Yeah.
Because we say it all the time. We use this cliche, follow your heart. I mean, listen, our parents would probably have said to us, we want you to follow your heart, because many of our parents didn't follow their own heart. They did what they had to do. Yeah. But that whole idea, if we really followed our heart and stood in our own power and agency, that's my word, it is transformative for us as people, as women, as communities, as society. And we're both mothers now, so I know we think about this for our own children. And I just think what you're sharing is just, it's that. And then that piece around this whole performance and performing for the praise and the applause, that's real. And it's even more real today than I think it's ever been, because everything is 24/7.
Yeah.
It's social. It's like, did I get enough likes? Did I get enough comments? If I post something, did anybody see it? We're doing this podcast. If anybody, hopefully somebody watches it, but we're not doing it for that. We're doing this really for, if we only, for me, if we only touch one person and it was touching and that was meaningful, then we've touched one person.
Yeah.
I don't have that same spirit, but I think it's just real. It's the world we live in. And to some degree that praise and that 24/7 applause, it's just become louder and louder, the need for it and the creation of it.
Yeah.
That I can imagine it's hard, and particularly for someone who's used to that, to experience that every day.
Yeah, I think performance culture is real. And I think, to your point, we are surrounded by it. I think our children have grown up in an environment where they are steeped in the need to perform. They're steeped in the need to show up a certain way, even if what's on the inside or what's behind the curtain or what's outside of the square, the Instagram square, doesn't look as as polished. There's one of the fortunate and or unfortunate things about this generation is that they have been steeped in that, right? And so this concept of performance, and so when you're steeped in it from a cultural perspective, and then if you've got your story where being a performance approval person is something that you've been raised in and that you've grown up in, and that definitely is a part of my story. And I learned later on, like my mom later on talked about being someone who was a performance approval person. And so, children learn what they live.
Generational.
Yeah, they learn what they live. There are a number of times that my mom and I had conversations. There may have been an experience that I walked through, and I walked through it, I'll say by myself, not that she wasn't there, but I learned an independence of just like we talked about, figuring it out and getting it done. So she would be there if I needed her, but oftentimes I would just try to figure things out. In college, when I cared for my brother, and we would have conversations and I would talk to her about experiences that I had. She would have had the exact same experience. The exact same experience. But we didn't tell anyone about it. We just had the experience. We figured it out. We got through it and we moved on.
Yeah.
And so at one point she said to me, and hopefully, Mommy, you're okay with me having this discussion. But
Shout out to moms.
But at one point she talked about being a performance approval person. And I was like, oh, I started to learn, where did I learn this behavior? Where did I learn how to show up this way? And now that I'm conscious of it, I really wanted for my daughters, I wanted to be able to break the cycle that they didn't feel as though they needed to perform for a certain type of applause. They didn't feel as though when they accomplished something, that accomplishment, although it is a great accomplishment, was not necessarily par for the course. Because if you normalize a level of excellence,
yes,
then when you do well, you just are like, oh, well. So even learning to appreciate your own accomplishments, learning to appreciate being one of the youngest vice presidents at L'Oreal, at the age of, I don't remember, I was 30 something. You left P&G and went to run multicultural at Coke. But all these things, they kind of just become normal. And then you don't really understand, you might lose and forget how special you are. And so this isn't necessarily to say, oh, I'm here to say how special I am. But what it is here to say is for the people that are doing the work and getting it done, make sure that when you're doing the things that you're doing and the ways that you're showing up, that you give yourself the credit, that you give yourself the applause, that you take time to enjoy those moments of success. And your highs shouldn't be too high and your lows shouldn't be too low. But don't normalize achievement to the point where it becomes so normal that you don't give yourself the credit.
Yes.
At the same time, I think the point that I was starting on was, from a performance culture standpoint, it's also really, really important to understand what validation you need to be performing for. Where does the validation need to come from? And you and I have had this conversation a lot around external validation versus internal validation. And you sit very squarely in the internal validation
100%.
lane, and I live over here in, managing my way through external validation. So understand where your validation is and where it sits and where it needs to come from. Because when you get into these corporate spaces, when you get into a private equity business startup, when you get into a co-owner role, if your validation is external, it makes it very, very difficult for you to navigate the journey of corporate America or enterprise, whatever it might be. If your validation is internal, then you take the highs and the lows and you continue, and you don't lose confidence in yourself. And, another episode, we're going to talk about confidence, but I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that internal validation piece.
Yeah. It's funny because each of these has their blessings and maybe sometimes their curses, if you will. because I don't think one is better than the other. They just manifest themselves differently. But for me, because I am so internally, I draw my energy, my confidence, who I am from internal, like grounding in who I am. I don't get a lot, honestly, from the applause, the external applause. In fact, to a large degree, oftentimes it makes me rather uncomfortable. We had a wonderful conversation. I was getting this big award about not quite a year ago, but not too long ago. And you were like, you didn't even tell me you were getting an award. And I was like, because not that I was ungrateful. And I don't ever want it to be that. I was incredibly grateful and thankful that I was chosen for this wonderful, prestigious award. It was celebrating Black women at the highest of their peak. But I was standing there thinking, I don't want this to be about me. Like, I want this to be about what's possible in the world, because what I believe my mission on this planet is to be a catalyst for possibility for all of us. It is not about my personal achievements and my personal goals. Do I have goals? Yes. Am I driven by my own goals? Absolutely. I set out to do something, you know this. I set out to do it. I'm gonna get it. I'm gonna get her done. Right. But I do that more because I believe it's a possibility for all of us. And I choose places and spaces that work for me, but they are often the road less traveled. People will look at me and they'll say, oh, you had this wonderful corporate career and you were a CEO and now you're in corporate boards. I want to be on boards. Or, you're a sports team owner, or whatever it may be, or a mother even, because there are women out here who would love to be able to balance all those things. How do you do it all? And for me, it's because everything that I choose, it innately works for me, and it isn't about the applause. And so I think that's that internal guide that I always sit with. And so I'm kind of like my own best cheerleader. I was like, oh, my only competition is me. Did I do that the way I wanted to do it? Did it show up the way I wanted it to be? And if it's not, then I'm like, okay, 2.0 needs to look different for me. And I work towards that. So that's how it manifests itself for me. But it also means these moments where sometimes I'm just frankly uncomfortable. I don't like to be in the limelight. Even doing this podcast for me and being public like this is not something that is naturally comfortable for me.
Right.
I've been on stages, I've done all the things, and I'm comfortable here and I'm comfortable there. But it's not, I say comfortable in the moment. I'm not necessarily comfortable with the public or the applause or all those things. And so I think that's the flip side of it for me that really kind of brings me, and I have to remind myself of that. And sometimes I just have to actually sit with those moments where they are so grand and they are so public, and they are so big. And first of all, I just, again, remain in gratitude for every one of them and the opportunities that I've had. But I just always remind myself that I'm a vessel of possibility for us as Black women, for us as aspiring anything that we may be. And when you start to talk about corporate America, as you were saying, I've had moments in corporate America where, people have said, you should do X, Y, and Z. And I said, no, I'm going to do ABC because ABC is what works for Ann. And so I think that internal kind of driving is what wakes me up every morning. It's what those moments where I can say, okay, and you done good. Yeah. You did what you wanted to do or how you thought it should be. But to your point, the conversations we've had is when the external is so important for someone, there are real serious moments, and even in my own career, where I could see where there was no applause or there was really hard feedback. And that could be really crushing. Yeah. To the point that, it's sometimes we talk about, you got to go in the mirror and give yourself affirmations. Yep. Like you got to get back to the internal. Yeah. So the side that I'm on tends to, you kind of got to go there naturally. Yeah. But that's hard because corporate America and this performance culture will eat you up and spit you out.
It will.
And not think twice.
It will. And move on to the next.
And move on to the next.
Sure.
The next Anne, the next Taydra, the next Michelle, the next whoever you are. And it will spit you out. And so our power for us and what I want us to see is that no matter what space we're in, that is not what defines A, who we are, B, how successful we are, and C, how we should think about ourselves. Because those spaces are going to change. They're going to change. The people in them are going to change. The situation is going to change. And so this idea of being able to come back to the center of who we are and how we see the world and how beautiful we are in the world every day, no matter if we glammed up or if we're in our sweats or if we do it our pajamas. We had this whole conversation about pajamas. Our favorite pajamas. I love pajamas. Okay, I will put on pajamas any time of the day. But this old idea of no matter what we look like, no matter what we're doing, no matter what it looks like to the outside world, we still are powerful in our being, not in our doing. And that's what's present for me. And it's so present right now in this day and time because we're doing the most. We had a lovely conversation about doing the most. If doing the most with people. But when you do the most, you have to really recenter. You have to recenter and remind yourself some of it's going to be successful, some of it's not. And you define the success, not the world.
And I think I love when you talk about being a catalyst for possibility and for people really being able to see what's possible in having made the choices that you've made, the path that you've walked, the twists and turns that you've had. I think when I think of my journey, I think of myself maybe as an executive cheerleader or I know that I'm an encourager. And I know that in my heart of hearts, no matter what space I have been in, one of my personal internal missions has been to make sure that I am encouraging and uplifting the women around me and letting them know whatever it is that you're facing, you can overcome this, whatever. And we can talk about the things that we've walked through. We can talk about racism. We can talk about sexism. We can talk about colorism. Like we've had these discussions. And so when I talk about overcoming things, it's not like, these aren't easy topics or easy challenges, but always wanting to encourage. And oftentimes I will have an encounter with someone who will say, do you remember? You talked to me about this, or you poured this into me, or you prayed for me, and I'll be like, oh, because I'm not keeping record, but it's a blessing for me to know that as a part of my journey, I can encourage someone along the way. And that probably does come from, leaning towards external validation and wanting to be able to give people validation when they need it, not to replace the validation that should come from inside, but just kind of being that, keep going, you'll get there.
I love that.
The other thing I want to say, though, is that I did get some from my dad. My father wasn't in our household, but, he did take a path off of corporate and decided to start his own business and started to do some other things. And so it's interesting because I have these two voices that speak to me. I have the, this is the way you're supposed to do things. And then I have the, but if you want to go. So even my career has kind of shown that, I hung out in corporate for about 10 or 12 years. And then I did, consulting and really working with businesses, women-led primarily businesses. We have Melissa Butler and the Lip Bar in common. We love Melissa.
TLB, absolutely, all day, every day.
And so I got that. So, I have this tug of war, and I love that as I am getting older and more mature, not older in age, but older and in wisdom,
wiser
in wisdom, that I'm able to lean into and give voice, to that side that says, yeah, whatever you decide. I will say this. I think it's important in this journey when you have to understand your story, you have to know how your story impacts what you do, and then you have to have people that remind you, right, of the parts of your story that are important and the parts of your story that you can set aside that you don't need to pay attention to. I call it your circle of champions. Like, who is your circle of champions? And I'm so grateful that you are one of my circle of champions, and hopefully I sit in that circle for
There's
you.
no hopeful. You know you sit in that circle.
I'm so grateful that I sit in the circle of champions for you.
Smack dab in the circle.
Knowing who that circle of champions is, whatever your journey, but especially in these corporate spaces and in these spaces of entrepreneurship and where these enterprise spaces, you have to have that circle of champions who will feed you what you need to be fed at the right time,
Yes.
with the right tone.
Yes. Yes. And the right questions.
Sometimes that tone is a little softer. Sometimes that tone is a little firmer. But those people who will be that fuel for you, because you can lose sight. Yeah, you can lose sight of those things that are important. You can lose sight, and it's important to have those people that will remind you. So I'm grateful that whatever the voice is that's been speaking to me, you've been one of those voices that has been a centering, grounding voice, and I'm grateful for your journey and your willingness to share with the world in a way that I know that is not necessarily comfortable for you, but I know that is very necessary, because we need all of what you have. So
I received that. And yes, you are always in my circle. You know, the thing that I think is really important that I say out loud is, and I know you feel the same way, for every encouraging word that I've ever been able to give in whatever context, in whatever moment, I am equally as encouraged, because whether I'm intentionally trying to be a cheerleader or an encourager, or whether it's just me wanting to see the best for you, or for anyone else around me, that for me, again, is back to being a catalyst for possibility, because then I know in that moment, it's opened up some other possibility just out of that conversation, just out of that moment. And that brings me joy. And I think us understanding that our stories are powerful and that we're able to take the power out of them and not give it up to them either. Yes. Because even though we know that we might have certain things about our story, you have to understand the power of your story and how you carry that and how it shows up, not to modify it, but just to be aware of it. And we all have stories, not just our origin story, but we have stories about everything that's happening around us at all times. And so how do we feed into those stories? How do we let them go when they don't serve us? Because that is a real question I think we all need to deal with, is sometimes our stories don't serve us. They don't help us. Yeah. And as much as we want to hold on to them, because they have been around for so long, they don't serve us anymore. Yeah. And so that's why I'm sitting here on this podcast, me being vulnerable, hard doesn't serve me, and again, not that I was hard, but it just moments, right? And when does it serve us to open up and to be different, and to think about our own personal journey? So this is as much a journey for me.
Yeah. I have not looked at these notes that we've spent weeks putting together, not one time. They would not understand how many hours we spent on what we were going to say and how we were going to talk about it, and who's going to say what.
This is how they know. This is truly from
our
who we are,
hearts.
from who we are, how we think about it, how we see the world, and the reality of it. So we'll be back for more.
But let's talk, as we close, let's talk about what is the story that you're authoring now.
So my story today is, I don't really have a story. So let me say it that way. Okay. Because it isn't about where I've been. It's not even about what I've done. All of that is there, and there's plenty of paper and, receipts, as we say, proof of that stuff. But the story that I'm authoring right now for me is to be present in the now.
Yeah.
And everything that I'm doing, from the things you listed to even some things that I am exploring for my own personal passion and talent, are being present in the now. And it's not about success as you know, the world would define it. Because that's not just what it's about for me. It's about being present in those things and bringing the joy out in those things and being a catalyst for possibility in every one of those things. So that's the story that I'm authoring. It's not about where I've been, or even, you know, whether it's race or, you know, just the heart or the, you know, all those, it's none of that. It is about just being who I am and continuing to stand tall in it. Y'all can't see, but I'm 6 feet tall. So no pun intended, but standing tall in that and authoring it in that way.
Yeah.
And seeing where else I can help others really, really see what's possible for them. So that's my story as I sit here today.
And you're sticking to it?
And I'm sticking to it.
I love it. Yeah, and I think for me at this stage, I think the story that I'm writing is one that I don't know exactly what the story is. What I know is that possibility that you talk about, I am embracing. The possibility of all the things that I want to do, put my hand to, have in my heart to do. And it doesn't have to look the way that it looked before. I think you and I have talked about how much I love beauty and, you know, how I have hung out in the beauty space. And don't get me wrong, I'm going to continue working and doing things in beauty because it's just a place that I love. It's just but I recognize that, you know, I built that as my identity, and that's not the soul of my external or corporate or business identity. There's so much more that, you know, that I'm interested in. And so I am excited about, you know, expanding my footprint from a beauty perspective, but also moving beyond that and giving myself the latitude and the freedom to go beyond beauty, maybe in ways that I had never ever considered. I also think that as you talk about people that you're helping, really looking at how to build women in this phase. Building communities of women, building women individually, helping women and especially Black women, and making sure that I can do whatever I can to give them whatever level of equipment that I have, equipping them in whatever way I can. And I think bringing my faith to the intersection, which you and I talk about a lot. And so it's really about the new possibility. It's really about beyond beauty, and it's taking whatever shackles I've put on myself. I'm taking those shackles off.
I love it.
And I'm running forward. So I'm excited. We did it. We finished our first episode. We did it.
Go Tay.
Go us. Go us. All right. So we'll
be back.
We'll be back.
We'll be back.